Okay, so good evening to all. Welcome to this Health and Safety Expert webinar. We're just going to have a quick run through the software this evening to show you how you can use the Health and Safety Expert to help manage your own health and safety requirements on site and for your company. Okay, as we're going through the webinar this evening, you should see that on your little GoToMeeting boxes that you've got on your screen, there's a place where you can ask questions. So if you've got any questions as we're going through, what I'll do is I'll answer them after sort of gone through the presentation. So initially I'm going through sort of a roughly set demonstration so you can get an idea of what it does, but please feel free to ask questions as we're going, and then once I've gone through sort of the main sort of demonstration of software, I'll go back to any questions you've had and of course any that you have at the end. Okay, so hopefully as you can all see on the screen, Health and Safety Expert main menu here. So Health and Safety Expert can work in two ways. One is you can create a project ad hoc yourself, or you can also import the data from Estimator Express. So if you've created an estimate in Estimator Express, what that does is it will tell Health and Safety Expert which build phases you're using, and it also has things like customers' details, and it'll bring that data in, and that will speed up the process of creating your health and safety paperwork. For tonight's purposes, I'm going to create a project manually. So I'll have a new project, give it a name. Big house. Project type, so we offer all sorts of domestic work and some commercial and such like. I'm going to say that this is an extension, so it's going to be a large extension, for example. Okay, and what that does is that selects the type of build phases that were typically required with an extension, and that then goes off to a matrix in the background which does all sorts of clever things and chooses a big list of risk assessments and COSHs which are typically associated with the build phases that you come across on your usual extension. Okay, so the first screen we have is our main project details screen. So you give it a project name, you can give it a reference, which should obviously be something you like, and then you fill in the information like clients. So I've got a little drop down here where I can see recent clients. So if it's a new client, I can click on this box on the right hand side, which brings me to my address book, and I could add a new client. In a peak of complete unoriginality, we will call him Mr. Smith. Job title, that could be where his job's going to be. He could be a company or he could be private. How you want to display him, so we'll have Mr. Smith. You can then put in his phone number, his address, etc. And then once you put this person's details in, you can then tick who this person is going to be. So in this case, it's fairly straightforward. He's going to be a client. Obviously, you would normally fill in more details than this. For brevity, I'm just going to skip through some of that. So I'm going to click OK. And then he's in my list, so I can now click OK to select him. And now we've got the client's address set up. Okay. Now the site address, I can click on. This could be the same address, in which case I could pick Mr. Smith, or it could be that Mr. Smith is a property owner who owns multiple properties, and you're doing your work on one of his jobs, or one of his properties, so you could add in a new address. For cheating purposes, I'm just going to select the same address tonight. Okay, so that's our client and the site dealt with. You've then got several fields which are to do with yourself. There's Health and Safety Director, so you might want to populate that. Quite often that would be yourself. We have the Principal Designer, so those of you who've had some experience with the new CDM 2015 guidelines know that the CDM coordinator no longer exists. So your health and safety is managed by 1 or 2 people. The pre-construction stage, this is managed by the principal designer. Okay, so again, you would either add an existing one if you had one, which I don't, or you can create a new one. So I'm going to click on my address book, and I'm going to add a new person in. So our architect will be called Mr. Drawing. His company will be Redraw Stuff Limited, etc. Blah, blah, blah. So I can fill in all of his details, and then we can say, so who is he? So I'm going to say, well, he's a designer. Okay, and he's nothing else, so he's just designer, so that's fine. So I'll click OK, put him in there. Oh, sorry, it needs to display who he is, so he's going to be Mr. Drawing, and select him. Okay, the next thing we need to have is a principal contractor. Now, there's a good chance that this could be you, or it could be someone that you have working for you if you have someone who is subcontracting and they're going to take over the role of principal contractor. Now, under Health and Safety 2015, the principal designer is responsible for the health and safety during all the pre-construction period. Okay, once you break ground, so to speak, depending on who appoints who, your principal designer may maintain control of the health and safety through the project. However, if he does not, he then has to hand over his responsibilities to your principal contractor, who will then take over the health and safety responsibilities. So as I mentioned before, this could be yourselves, or it could be someone that you appoint if you have somebody who's working for you as a major subcontractor. So again, this could be your name or someone new. So I'm going to click on here, because I've got nobody in this yet. I'm going to click add. So full name. Let's have me as a builder. A scary thought. Again, fill in some details. Use the office address, might as well. Okay, so this is a contractor. Okay, now it could be we also do some design work, so you might actually put yourself down as a potential as a designer as well. It could be that I'm also the health and safety director, so I can actually tick different boxes here to have different things for whatever I'm going to do. So I'm going to set myself as the health and safety director and also as a principal contractor. Okay. And then the last part of this is we need to select the HSE that's going to be relevant. So as you see here, we have all the UK HSE. Okay. Assuming the job is notifiable, okay, you need to know who your HSE is. We've put a big list of them on here, so you don't have to go hunting about for whoever they are. So, for example, we're in Bristol, HSE Bristol. There you go. It's going to be these guys here. Click OK. Job done. So I've got that information for if I need to populate the F10. If any of you saw the old version of Health and Safety Xpert, we used to have a button which used to create the F10 for you. As of April 2015, the HSE no longer accept paper F10s. It all has to be done online. So what you go is go to the HSE website, which we provided you a link to down here. Log on to their site and you actually fill in the F10 online. Okay. Now, just coming down to this, we've actually put, in fact, we've actually put the link here for the F10 notification, and we put a link to a load of useful places on the HSE website. It's a very, very big website with an awful lot of info, and it's very easy to get lost. So we found a lot of the more construction relevant information and put that in links here. And we are waiting for the ratification of CDM 2015 come October for them to finalise it and hopefully release an ACOP and the such like, and we'll then put a load more links down here as well to help you understand your responsibilities. Okay, so we've set up our project. So the next thing we can look at is a health and safety policy. Okay, this is a fairly weighty document. This is a company health and safety policy. It's one we've pre-written. It's about 20 pages. And it just goes through standard sort of things that any responsible company should have in place. So it's a very good overview. If you're new to managing your own health and safety, this is a really good starting point because it sort of lists a lot of the areas where you have to take responsibility. It lists what your responsibilities are and the sort of activities that you'll be undertaking to make sure that your company, employees and people responsible for are working safely. Okay, now I'm not going to print this because it produces a big 20-page document. It's a bit massive, but you can see here, just looking at the screen, a few ideas of some of the things that it has in here. The organisational chart, I'll just click on this button, allows you to put in the structure of your company. So you can have a managing director, you could have a person who's going to be, say, your project manager who's in charge of the work, and you can then put a list of site managers, contractors, employees, etc. And you can do all sorts of formats of this, and you have people over here coming out left, right, and centre, wherever you want them. Okay, what we do have then further down here is we have details of responsibilities of these people. So if I click on this box here, safety director's duties, this actually tells you what that person needs to do. Duties of site managers and foremen. Okay, so if you're not quite sure, this is actually going to give you an awful lot of information. Okay, as I say, what would normally happen is you'd actually print this out as a document, which gives you, say, it's about 20 odd pages, which gives you a big list of this. Very useful for your own reference. It's also a very good sales tool if you are at the early stages of trying to win business with a new client. Often clients are interested in your health and safety practices. If you can give them this document as an overview, it's a very good starting point for them to understand that you take your health and safety seriously. Okay. Once you've done the health and safety policy, basically all you do is you get what we've got for you already, and you just do a few tweaks. Once that's done and saved, you don't need to edit it every job. It's just the sort of thing you'd look at just once. Okay, so getting on to job-specific tasks, the next part is the pre-construction info. Okay, so this is the part where the principal designer needs to be either filling in this information or supplying you with the information you require to fill this in. Because the principal designer is now responsible for ensuring or designing out risks, as the HSE would put it, they have to be very heavily involved with the health and safety aspect prior to you breaking ground. So, of course, if they're designing the job, they're talking to structural engineers, they're looking at the site, etc. They need to be thinking about health and safety when they're actually coming up with their designs. They need to not design things which are dangerous to build or cause be hazardous to people in the local area. So with this, you start off clicking on each section and fill in the details. So description of the project, click on this button here, and we then break this down into several sections. So a project description including client brief could be something along the lines of large 2-story extension, expected build time 4 months, blah, blah, blah. It talks about the client brief here. The client brief is something that's always been around but has largely been ignored. The CDA 2015 has re-emphasised the client brief. Essentially, the client brief is where the client says to you, I want it built in such and such time, and please don't upset these people. To give you a very simple version of it. It's sort of what is the client expecting. In its simplest form, that they want you to build something and it not fall over. Okay. Part of the client brief is building something safely. The client might not necessarily know that they actually need to brief you that. With a domestic client, as the contractor, you will actually take over the responsibility of making sure that happens. Okay, if you are working with a business client, the business client obviously has much greater responsibilities for health and safety. We've actually got some documentation which I'll show you towards the end, which will help you about that. For a domestic client, though, it is deemed that because they are clearly not going to be an expert on construction health and safety, the principal contractor, probably you guys, will take over the client's responsibility for health and safety. Okay, key dates could be on site, I don't know, 1st of October, major deliveries start 3rd October. You could have maybe a crane coming on site for large scale stuff, so you put those sort of deliveries in. Proposed finish date 28th of February. I think that's bad maths, so I think that's 5 months, but there we go, etc. Proposed use of structure, domestic residence, flat, apartment for students, etc. So there's no rocket science here. It's actually very straightforward. And all we do is we've simplified it down so that you just have to put in a short phrase to answer each question. If there's any existing records and plans, you can put in the references for those. And again, the client brief, if you want to fill in more information, you don't have to particularly put much more information in there, but because it's new with CDM 2015, we've put a field in there. It's kind of any other info field. Once you're happy with that, you click OK, and you pop on to the next box. Okay, planning and managing the project. Work should be carried out in all times in accordance with health and safety, blah, blah, blah. Communication and liaison with the client, so telephone numbers, email addresses, faxes, pigeons, etc. Any of that kind of detail, who the contacts are. Site security, could be that you're going to have fencing, a man with a big dog. It could be there's no security because it's domestic premises. Welfare provision, of course, will be things like portaloo, potentially a site cabin, or mobile home, etc. What are you going to have in place to cover your employees' welfare? If you want to get a fine from the HSE, don't sort your welfare out. They're absolutely red hot on it at the moment. We've even heard stories quite recently of somebody being fined for having no hot water in place whilst he was setting up the welfare, which seems a bit ridiculous, but that's how extreme they are on it. They're under the impression that if you can't be bothered making sure that your builders are okay, what other efforts are you going to put on? So I can kind of see the point, but it's kind of a bit harsh. But obviously you want your guys to be happy, so you want to make sure they've got tea, coffee, biscuits, hot water, and somewhere to get changed. So you need to put in the information of how they're going to be doing that. Site holding requirements, that'll be things like your all visitors must report to such and such, PPE must be worn, helmets must be worn, etc. All your sort of signs. If there's any restrictions on vehicles, you might have no deliveries before 8 o'clock, after 5 o'clock, etc. That kind of thing. If you're going to use a permit to work system, which is optional, and we have all the permits in the software, you can actually specify in here which ones you're going to be using to control certain high-risk areas. Fire precautions, typically things like hydrants, fire briefs, area. You need to have an area where everyone's going to meet up if everything does set on fire, that kind of thing. Emergency procedures, emergency escape. So again, you're just going to simply document these areas, fill them in. Any areas designed as confined spaces, and of course smoking and parking restrictions. Okay, follow the fields, fill them in. Okay, I'm not going to keep going through every single one of these because I'll be here all night going through every single box, but I think hopefully you're getting the idea. Your environmental restrictions and existing on-site risk. Click on that button, read the boxes, fill them in. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned here is that where you've got where you've got one of these boxes, you may notice there's a little save button here. So I could pop here, adjacent land use. I could say it is a residential area existing road to existing properties, property bounded on 3 sides by other residences. Okay, and I think I really like that paragraph. I don't want to have to type it again. So what I can do is I can save this paragraph and I can call it residential next door. Okay, this now means that next time I come to do another job and it says adjacent land use and it's exactly the same as this, I can click on this button over here, and there you go, I've got my residential next door. Click OK, select it, and it drops it in the box. So when you're filling these boxes in, if it's the sort of information you think, well, I'm probably going to be typing that over and over again, once you type the paragraph in, save it, give it a name that means something, and you can then reuse it. So what you'll find is that as you use the software and you do more and more jobs, it gets faster and faster and faster because you're going to populate these with pre-written sentences of your own. Okay, and that principle follows all the way through the software. So again, you're just going to answer these questions and go all the way through. Okay, you're going to do the same for your significant design and construction hazards and the health and safety file. Once that's done, you're then going to hit print. That will create your Word document for which you can either have for yourself, have it ready to show the HSE, have it for your principal contractor, etc. Okay, so the next bit I'm actually just going to jump over to the health and safety plan. I'm just going to come back to these parts in a minute. Okay, so the health and safety plan is your construction phase plan. So this is the part that the principal contractor will be in charge of, or your principal designer will be in charge of if he's going to maintain responsibility of the health and safety for the entire period of the job. So this is very similar, and a lot of this you can actually copy and paste it from the pre-construction info. So again, design description, key dates, etc. So you can just do some copy and pasting for a lot of this. Exactly the same principle, fill in the fields, click OK. Put in your management structure, it will pick that up off your health and safety company policy. Then how are you going to manage the work? Now a lot of this we have filled in and done the work for you, which is quite handy. Okay, we always try and do as much as we possibly can to save you having to type. You're of course welcome to add whatever you like to any of these fields. Okay, big section is contact names, clients, etc., and designer details, contractor details, all the services. So same as we did before, you can click on a button, click add, put in the details of someone and say, yeah, that's my utility company, Eon, British Gas, whatever, water services, etc., that kind of thing. What that's interested in is if something goes wrong, like you break into a gas main, who is it you're going to phone up and apologise to and get to come and fix it? Okay, local emergency services, etc. So you want to have basically a set of numbers for in case something does go wrong. Your arrangements, so how you're going to deal with people. So again, we've done most of this for you. Adjacent land use, obviously you'll need to fill in on a job by job basis. This is looking at the environmental side of things, so stuff like is it going to be asbestos, contaminated land, manual handling. So those typical sort of well-known environmental areas of noise reduction, etc. And of course, highlighted any other significant health risks. You could be working. You could be working in an industrial area. Typical one, if you say you're working in near factories or something like that, a significant health risk could actually be high volumes of traffic, delivery lorries, forklift trucks, that kind of thing. So it's that sort of stuff to bear in mind. And of course, what you're going to do with the health and safety file. We've done all that bit for you. Okay, and again, once you finish that out, finish that, you'd hit print and job's done. So let's go back to risk assessments. This is a juicy bit. This is what everyone wants to look at. So a little bit like with Estimator Express, for those of you who are familiar, we've created a picking list here. So you'll see that I said at the start of this job, I said I wanted to do an extension. So I've got a great big list here, and I've got 50, 60 risk assessments there. You're not going to need all of those risk assessments. But what it does do is it gives you a library to look at, to go down the list and go, right, do I need a risk assessment or do I not need a risk assessment? So, for example, all operations, you're going to want that as a core one. Construction site offices, well, if you're not building a site office, you don't really need that risk assessment. If you are building a site office, you do need it. Transportation of packaged and unpackaged goods. Okay, if you are having your merchant deliver everything to you, you don't particularly need that risk assessment. However, if you're going to be driving to and from, or you've got staff driving to and from your merchant to pick up goods, you're going to need that risk assessment. The same for storage of packaged and unpackaged goods. If you're storing stuff on site, you're going to need that. Okay, so things that are pretty likely you're going to want: earthworks, excavations, handling the lanes, dredging materials. These are all standard on most jobs, so you're probably going to want those. So let's go and have a look at a couple of those. We'll go with excavations, as this is quite a good risk assessment, and it's a very high risk area. So I'm going to select this risk assessment, hit print. Okay, it prompts me to save my project because I haven't done that yet, so that's a good advice. I'm going to click yes. Okay, I'm going to call it Big House. And here we go. So what this actually is a list of every single piece of paperwork in the software. And you'll see that I've got at the moment, there's the one that I selected. What you would normally do is when you're going to do your risk assessments, you would actually go, actually, I'm going to want that one and that one there, and I want that and that. And yeah, I want that one and that one. I'm not going to use that, but I want some of that. I want that, etc. And you just go and pick 20 or 30 and then hit print and create them all at one time. Okay. Or you can do 10 at a time, or you can do one at a time if you want to. Okay, now I'm just going to pick one for speed. Now you can, before you actually hit print, you can select print, which sends it straight to the printer, or you can do print preview, which basically opens up Word in a print preview. Open file just opens it up in Word, or you can hit save to file, which will just automatically save the document. So what a lot of people tend to do is when they're first getting used to software, so what I normally do is I go with the open file option, which is what we're going to do in a moment. That opens up the document in Microsoft Word, so you can have a quick look at it, make sure it's okay. Okay. Once you've sort of got the hang of that, people then either tend to send it straight to the printer if you just want to have a folder full, or if you're going to email these documents, what you can actually do is hit save to file. You'll see here that I've got a folder. My output folder is my documents folder, health and safety, big house. So if I hit save to file and I go to my documents later on, go into my health and safety and then to big house, I'm going to have a folder here full of all the risk assessments and all the other paperwork that I produce for this job, which I can then email to a client, email to whoever it is, email to other people involved in the build, your contractors, designers, etc. Or, as I said before, you can just go in and print them out. So I'm going to hit print so we can have a look at what this risk assessment looks like. Okay, it says this doesn't exist yet. Do I want to create it? Yes, please. Okay, so I told it to save the file, so it saved it. So I'm going to double click on it and open that up. All right, and let's just make that a bit bigger so you can see it. Okay, so it puts in the detail what the operation is, who's at risk. Okay, it's got our logo here because that's the logo I want to use. If you want to, you can have your logo on there, so you can have your company logo on the paperwork. Okay, and that's something you can change. So we use the traffic light system. This is something which the CITB kind of came up with, and the HSC kind of run with it, and it's their preferred system. You have a pre-control risk rating and post-control risk rating, and just so here you have an exposure and severity. Okay, so over here we have an exposure. So without control measures, level of exposure for an excavation to collapse because it's unsupported, or things falling in and hurting people, or being struck by an excavator, is 6. Okay, that's a very high level. 7 is a max. 2 is how serious is that going to be. 6 is risk of death. Okay, 7 is risk of multiple deaths. Okay, so what it then says is, right, let's bring in these control measures. So here it gives you advice on what you need to do. Okay, so for some of you out there, you might know what you're doing. You just want to have some paperwork to say, look, I know what I'm doing, and here's the paperwork to prove it. For some of you, you might actually be going, I'm not quite sure what are the best control measures for excavations. Okay, this document will tell you what those control measures should be. If you follow this, you will work safely. Okay, so it says if we perform all these tasks here, for example, materials to be stockpiled a suitable distance away from the excavation. It sounds like common sense, but how many times do you see that doesn't happen? Wheel stops to be used to prevent plant and vehicles running over the edge. I've spoken to many builders who've told me stories of wheelbarrows falling on their heads whilst they're in excavations. It seems to happen a lot more than it should do. Okay, if you follow these, what then happens is that your chance of it happening drops from 6 to 1. That means low risk. Okay, you can never have 0 risk because that's life. There's always going to be some risk. The other thing is that by following these measures, it means the severity is going to be far less. For example, if you stock things away, if something does fall in, it might be a brick as opposed to a ton of bricks. It's less likely to hurt. Okay, so what that does is it gives you a score of 1, which is green. This is good. Okay. Another hazard, services cutting into underground cables. So if you don't go and locate the services and you start digging holes, there's a good chance you're going to hit gas, electricity, or water. Okay, what happens if you hit gas, electricity, or water? Well, if you hit electricity, good chance it will kill someone. If you hit gas, could kill someone. If you hit water, well, you're going to get pretty wet. Okay, if you bring these measures in, so you use location equipment, maps, etc., take appropriate action to avoid contact overhead lines, you then see that your chance of something going wrong comes down to 2, which is fairly low risk. Okay, you'll notice your severity is still 6 because if you get it wrong, it's still going to hurt. You could still kill someone, but overall your score is a 12, so your overall risk is low. Okay, it's still green. Okay. This is one of those things where it doesn't matter how much you reduce the risk. If it does go wrong, it could potentially be bad. Okay, you're not going to lie about it. It's a statement. What you're after as a builder is reducing the risk. Okay, you can't stop something hurting, but you can reduce the opportunity of that ever happening, and that's what your job is, and that's what this is trying to demonstrate. Okay, so this is your typical risk assessment, and all risk assessments follow the same format. Okay, and you've got details and times there where you can sign them off, dates when they've been checked, etc. Okay, and just give you a little bit of background, these risk assessments aren't something that we've put together. We actually went to some health and safety consultants who work specifically in the construction industry and basically said, what paperwork do you give to your clients? And this is the paperwork that they designed for builders. Okay, so we haven't gone and just made something up. This is actually taken existing construction health and safety experts and basically computerized it. So all the documentation you're seeing here is tried and trusted and proven, and it's very, very, very good quality. Okay, feedback we get from an awful lot of users whenever they have a visit from the HSE is the general comment is that's the best paperwork they've ever seen. Okay, don't mean to sound big-headed about it, but we are. It is very good quality paperwork because of the quality of the consultants that we've used. Okay, so following that principle, you would go down your list, work out which ones you want and print them. If you're not sure whether or not you need a risk assessment, well, just print it. Worst thing is it's cost you 10 pence in ink. It's not the end of the world. Okay, you see the list is pretty extensive. Okay, all sorts of machinery, tools, asbestos materials. The asbestos risk assessment is pretty good. It says get somebody else to do it. Make sure that somebody's obviously authorized. Okay, authorized visitors risk assessment. If you have a construction site with visitors on site who have not been signed in and are unescorted and not wearing PPE, your fine will be an absolute minimum of £5,000. Okay, absolute minimum, up to about £20,000 to £25,000, and they will shut you down on the spot, and then demand that you produce huge amounts of paperwork and grovel massively. It's HSE's probably hottest thing, undocumented visitors on site, because if there's an accident and the fire brigade arrive to rescue people, if they don't know how many people they have to go rescuing, that's seen as being a major issue. And to be honest with you, they've got a fair point. Okay, demolition risk assessment, fairly standard. If you're going to be doing an extension, you're probably going to be doing a knock through. So this is the sort of thing that you would want to have a look at. So let's print that and put it up on screen. It's one you probably all use quite a lot. I'm going to do open file this time and just hit print. Send that straight to Microsoft Word. Just zoom that in a bit. So, activities demolition, the hazard is the plant. First risk, damage to the property or adjacent of the site. Okay, so local authority, the HSE to be informed of proposed demolition where necessary. It's almost de facto these days. If you're doing demolition, they need to know. They're getting very, very strict on it. Okay, premature collapse of the building. It's a pretty big risk. Okay, good chance of happening. You'll notice here that the severity is 7. That's basically multiple deaths may occur. So if you have a building and there's 4 people stood underneath it and it goes, it could kill all 4 people. Hence that being such a high level. Okay, so and you see here it tells you what you need to do. So again, you follow all these procedures. The main one being here is a method of demolition. Okay, this is the only place where you are legally required to produce a plan of some sort. A lot of people will look at it as being a method statement. Just a quick word on that. The HSE have no legal requirement anywhere for method statements. The only people who require method statements are people who don't know that much about health and safety and have been told by somebody who was told by somebody else who said to somebody else that you must have a method statement. A method statement doesn't exist in the HSE world. It's something that's kind of come about. Okay. Areas where you would use a method statement really is if you've got an area with some risks which are massive in comparison to, say, a typical risk assessment. We regularly get asked for people to say, "Oh, I need a method statement to build an extension." You don't need a method statement to build an extension. It's a very simple and low risk job. A reasonable area to ask for a risk assessment would be, for example, if you were repairing a church spire. So it's very, very high up. So it's a bit more extreme than just working on a sloping roof. Another example of a method statement being used would be where you have a site which is on a sloping hill. The road hasn't yet been built, so lorries cannot get up the hill, and you have a significant amount of manual handling that all the materials have got to be lugged 100 metres up a hill. That's a bit more than manual handling. You'd have to have a gang of people rotating to get materials up the hill. So that's the sort of area where you use a method statement. Again, there isn't a requirement by the HSE for that, though there are some areas where it is a bit extreme, where it makes sense. Most of the time that you need a method statement is for commercial purposes, i.e. your client demands a method statement. Okay, so we do have a method statement wizard, and I'm going to come to that in a minute. The one area where there is a legal requirement for a plan which is similar to a method statement is you must have a demolition plan. Okay, if you're doing demolition work, that is a legal requirement, and it makes sense that you would use a method statement as to create a demolition plan. Excuse me. Okay. And as you see there, detailed method statement will be prepared, submitted to approval before work commences. It's the only place where the HSE will demand a plan, and a method statement will fulfill that requirement. Okay, so big list of risk assessments. Okay, if I click on the Add button over here, okay, this lists all the risk assessments that haven't been automatically chosen. So by default, these aren't the risk assessments we would normally associate with building an extension. However, they could still be relevant to the job. For example, you might be building an extension in such a position that you're actually going to have to do some traffic management. So there's some traffic management risk assessments in here that you can make use of. Okay, a risk assessment that never gets put in by default but may well be relevant would be the one for young persons. So if you've got some apprentices who are under the age of 18, you must have a young person's risk assessment to tell you how you are going to make a lot of extra preparations, training, guidance, and literally holding their hand of people who are under the age of 18. Okay. Risk assessment for authorised visitors' house purchases. If this is a new build and you've got people coming on site and because you're pre-selling the properties, again, you need to have a look at risk assessment here, how you deal with them. Again, it's very much a case of documenting them onto the site, staying with them, and then documenting them off the site. Needles and syringes. If you're working in an area where drug use happens, if you're doing inner city builds, it does happen. You need to know what to do to deal with them, because the last thing you want is some drug users wandering onto your site, throwing some syringes away, and someone goes, "Oh, what's that?" Picks it up and gets pricked by a syringe, and then gets infected by Lord knows what. Okay, so hope you get the gist of that. Any of these that you see. So you might be doing some dry stone walling. Basically, you just tick it, click OK, and it adds it into the list. Okay, so onto COSH. Exactly the same principle. We would give you a big list of COSHs, which we think are suitable for the job. You'll see some fairly common ones there, like ready mix concrete, Portland cement, things you use all the time, red diesel, de-icer, etc., that kind of thing. So a lot of these things are ones you can buy, and you could, of course, download the data sheet from the manufacturer's website. But what we do is we put these into a common format. So if we look at Portland cement, for example, we create a data sheet that has a standard format. So if we just zoom in again, you'll see there we have a description of substance, what it is, who makes it. Obviously, cements, there's a lot of cements are generic, they're all pretty well the same substance. Application, who's at risk. Okay. What are the hazards? So frequent on civil engineering, exposure limits, highly unlikely. Health risks and irritant skin of eyes. Okay, chemical burns, harmful if swallowed. Okay, PPE, gloves, overalls, goggles, respiratory, FP2s. Is there a fire risk? No, you'd have to work hard to set concrete on fire. What are the sort of risks? What happens with spillage? How you store it, etc. Okay, so if you've got a gaseous substance, say you've got oxyacetylene, storage will obviously be store it somewhere not hot, locked up, etc., that kind of thing. And then what to happen if something actually happens? So if somebody eats some cement, okay, do not induce vomiting. Obviously, that's the first thing a lot of people tend to think of, because cement contains lime. When it comes into contact with the acid in your stomach, it reacts quite violently. If you then induced vomiting, what would happen is that the person's throat would be completely destroyed and they would suffocate. So in actual fact, what you need them to do is drink lots of water, and it needs to go out the other end. Okay. It's this bit of information that you're after, because it's when something goes wrong, you need to very quickly go, right, I need section 8, what do I do? There's my answer. Right, let's take action appropriately. All right. That's the advantage of having all our COSHs with the same format. You always know if something goes wrong, quick, let's jump to section 8. Here's what we need to do. Okay, so it covers a wide range of materials. It also covers things which you can't buy. Dust from cutting and planing operations. Okay, so if you are cutting bricks, tiling, etc., anything like that, cutting concrete, It's now seen as much higher risk. The HSE have gone very heavy on silica over the last few years. You'll see that the COSHs, if I just bring this up and show you, they've upgraded everyone's mask requirements. It used to be FP2 for most cutting operations. These days it's now FP3. Okay. And the main reason for this is because of the risk of silica, which they've now found is in far more things than they thought it was, and obviously they've now recognised it as having as a higher risk, sort of a little bit in the order of the way asbestos is a risk. Okay, so again, we've got that in here. So that's the latest legislation. It's up to date. As I mentioned before, we have some health and safety consultants who work with us. As things get changed, they update our paperwork or we update it in the software. Okay, other things you can't buy. Pigeon droppings. Okay, sounds a bit silly. Any of you who are roofers probably know about this one. If you do refurb work on existing properties, pigeon droppings are probably the single most dangerous thing you will ever actually come across. They're the only thing on site that can kill you in about 4 different ways: histoplasmosis, encephalitis, meningitis, etc., salmonella. It's actually quite high risk. So the COSH here, this isn't something you can buy, so you can't download a COSH for it. We've pre-supplied it for you though. It tells you what to do: dust suppression techniques, damping down, high ventilation, etc. So it actually gives you advice. So this isn't something you can buy. You may come across it and think, well, how am I supposed to deal with pigeon droppings? Or it could be bat guano, same sort of thing. Okay, well, actually we'll advise you on the best methods to ensure the safety of all the people working in that area. Okay, and actually COSHs is it's a very large list. There's altogether about 150 COSHs. There's about 150 risk assessments as well. Okay, so just jump into method statements after my slight waffle about how you don't actually necessarily need them. The fact of life is that a lot of clients will demand a method statement, rightly or wrongly. Okay, so we have 3 sort of pre-written ones. Okay, which are examples. We don't supply them anymore because a method statement by its very definition is for where it's something that's unique that's not covered by a risk assessment. If a client asks you for a method statement that's the same as a risk assessment, then your risk assessment essentially is your method statement. It's already done. And an awful lot of method statements actually basically say, please refer to risk assessment RA7, RA10, RA15, etc. And you just cross-reference all your risk assessments. Okay, but I'll show you what one looks like. So let's do an industrial roofing one. So let's select that. Okay, of course, if you wanted to write one from scratch, you just click new. Okay, I'm going to edit this one. And a little bit like we had on the screens before, what we've done is just break it down into lots of simple sections for you. So introduction, blah, 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 we filled that bit in for you. Okay, description of work. Okay, so you would put in description of work. And again, as I mentioned before, if this is a job you do regularly, you can fill in this description of work. You can then save it, give it a name. Next time you come across the same job, you can go, oh, I've done that before. You can then save that paragraph. You can also save the entire method statement if it's a sort of work you regularly do. We have a lot of people who have method statements for building domestic extensions and things like that because they tend to work for, they subcontract for larger contractors who want method statements. So they're doing essentially the same job over and over again. So they've got a method statement, they've gone through this process, written it once, saved it, and then they just reuse the method statement and tweak any individual bits which might vary. Scope of the works, sequence of operations, so how we're going to conduct the work, duration, completion criteria. As you can see, there's no rocket science to here. It's very straightforward, and we split it down into very small paragraphs to keep it as easy as possible. You just need to put in whatever you need. When you're filling in one of these, if you think something's not relevant, there's nothing wrong with putting NA for not applicable, because you don't have to fill something in. You also don't have to write a 10,000 word essay. You're going too far. A method statement should never be more than about 10 pages. I recently saw an 85-page method statement. which somebody has spent weeks and weeks writing and was very proud of it. And they actually had a site visit, and the HSE asked him what on earth he was doing, because it was about 80 pages too long, because there was so much information in there, so much waffling on, that it was actually almost impossible to find where the point of it was. A method statement should be to the point and informative. Okay, so location of work, it's going to be such and such place, access arrangements, etc. So all you're going to do is bob through these paragraphs, fill them in. License, if you're going to be doing a boiler, gas safe registration license, etc. Electricians. Permit to work, so you could be using permit to work system, which I'll talk about a bit further later on. So you can fill out details in. See who's going to be supervising, who's going to be in there, who's qualified. PPE, what's going to happen, emergencies and accidents. You see, a lot of this stuff here, you've actually already covered it in other documents. You are essentially repeating yourself. Okay, methodology. Okay, so I'll just quickly leave that on screen there so you can see it's fairly straightforward. And within the methodology, what a lot of people do at this stage is actually say, might actually say safety netting to be placed, and then brackets as per a risk assessment 45 or whatever it is, which is working at heights or sloping roofs, etc. So you can cross-reference your risk assessments, so you don't have to reproduce hundreds and hundreds of lines of safety information. Okay, and again, once you've done, you click OK, print your method statement. Okay, so on to the final section of health and safety, which is the management documents. Now, this is a whole load of stuff for you to have generally on site. You may or may not be working on jobs which are notifiable. You might be doing a small 1 month extension. That's not really going to be notifiable. If you're doing an extension that's taken 3 or 4 months, good chance it's notifiable. For those of you who don't know now, all domestic work falls under the same criteria as commercial work for notifiability. So there's no longer the fact that small domestic jobs aren't notifiable. All jobs can be notifiable. What defines it as notifiable now is whether it is basically the duration. Typically, once a job goes over sort of 3 or 4 months, you're into the realms of it being notifiable. Okay, if you've got a small lean-to extension that's a 4-week job, that's not notifiable. If you're building a 2-story extension that's a £500,000 job because it's on the side of a mansion, it's going to take you 6 months, that is notifiable under the new rules. Okay, now, notifiable or not, a lot of this paperwork here is very good for covering yourself legally. So some of it is there to cover yourself against the HSE, or to work with the HSE, shall we say. But a lot of these things here are to cover yourself for the legal side of things. So, for example, site induction register and site induction. So you could fulfill a site induction, do a register. Combine that with things like, say, PPE register, toolbox talk, register, etc. If you then have a solicitor phone you up in 2 years' time and say, yes, I'm going to take you to court and sue you for lots of thousands of pounds because I've got this guy here and he's got really severe psoriasis because you never told him about how he should handle goods and you never gave him any gloves to protect himself. If you've got a PPE register with the guy's signature on saying that he had gloves and all the PPE on every job that you worked for you, and you've got toolbox talks to show you that he had been taught how to use equipment correctly, and he'd done a site induction to show how he should be working on site and how to handle goods, etc. You've then actually got all the paperwork you need to refute that claim and tell said solicitor to go and stick it somewhere. If you don't think that's a particularly serious thing, if you pick up The Sun, Daily Mail, or a certain newspaper like that, you'll see that almost every day there's a full-page ad from several big solicitor companies saying, are you a subcontractor? Have you sustained an injury or an illness that you think might have been down to your building work? And they are now targeting people very heavily to then go and sue people they've worked for in the past to get their money, rightly or wrongly. Okay, if you have this paperwork in place that says, I had this employee working for me, and on the 4 jobs he worked for me, I've got his signature on inductions, I've got his signature on a PPE register, I've got his signature on toolbox talks, you are covered. You can prove that you have done nothing wrong, and if there is any negligence, it's actually on the behalf of the employee or former employee. Okay, so a lot of this is actually just to cover yourself. A lot of this is also good advice. Okay, so work permits, let's have a quick word about that. You'll see here we've got work permits for 6 of the most high-risk areas: asbestos, working at heights, confined space, electrical work, excavations, and hot works. What the work permit does is you basically brief your staff at the start with your site induction to say, we use a work permit system, which means if you've got, say, a roof on the job, there's a work permit that's going to be on a wall somewhere or in a folder, and it's going to say, Bob and Jeff are allowed to work on a roof between 9 and 5. Nobody else is allowed on the roof. Okay, and it's a good way of controlling high-risk areas to stop people who should not be there helping out or being helpful. Okay, you can also control the times of risks. You might have that you only want particularly risky things to happen on such and such hours because you know that there are other people on site to help in case there is an accident. Okay, so a permit system is a very good way of controlling it, especially if you have a lot of subcontractors or irregular workers. You can basically say to them, if your name is not on that permit, you cannot work in that area on those tasks. It's an excellent way, just reducing accidents, making your site more safe. Okay, the site setup checklist and the where's it gone? Site inspection checklist. One of them is a sort of when you start the job checklist, and the other one is a sort of weekly one. If we go and print this site inspection checklist, this is quite a hefty document, because a lot of people say to us, okay, it's my first time I've done my health and safety myself and managed it. Where's my starting point on site? I'm not really sure what to check. The site inspection checklist is a nice big document which you can carry around, and it, as you'll see in a moment, it gives you all your high-risk areas and basically says, have you checked this? Have you checked that? And what you'll do is you'll have the corresponding risk assessment with you to double check it, and you can go around this site when it's initially set up, and you can do weekly checks to make sure that you're on top of things. So if you look at this here, so here's our job. So let's have a look at the access areas. Are all these things the case? Yes, they are. Comments, no, this isn't sorted yet. I need to get it fixed. Are my COSHs in place? Yes, they are. No, they're not. Oops, need to do some printing. Has this been sorted out? Excavations, have we got wheel stops? Have we got personnel not working in unsupported trench? So you've got a 3 metre deep trench and you've got no boards on it, and there's people down there. Okay, and some of you may have seen, it's not that long ago, was it last year, that 4 people were killed in the trench down in Cornwall. Okay, it still happens. People still do it. Okay, stop blocks, etc. So you'll look at excavations, you'll look at these headlines here, you'll get your excavations risk assessment just to cross-refer that and go, yes, 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 these are all okay, etc. So this is your this is your checklist. Work through these areas. Obviously, if something's not relevant, put NA. Okay. So this basically is your sort of top line check. Is my site going to be safe? You go through this. Yes, it is safe. A lot of customers who use the software kind of say that this document is their Bible. This is they use this to control all the health and safety on the site. As you see, it's fairly comprehensive. Okay, waste management, absolutely nothing to do with health and safety whatsoever. However, because it's a piece of paper, it always gets lumped in with health and safety and environmental things. Okay, so the site inspection checklist is like a big one, and then there is up here a site setup checklist. This is one you sort of go through every week. It's a smaller list. Okay, so you see other things on there. Noise assessment, PPE register, as I mentioned before, harness inspection, pretty good idea. Lifting equipment inspection, so inspections of equipment, and he's inspecting excavation, etc. Scaffold inspection, obviously it should be carried out by a scaffolder. Okay, and you'll also see that there are registers to go with these. So you can, this tells you what you need to check. So you might do your own scaffolding. If you do your own scaffolding, you have to do your own inspection, and then you have to sign it. If you've got a scaffolding company doing it, they do it, and then they sign your register for you. Okay, here's your fire plan. Okay, site rules. Okay, pretty good idea. Tell you guys what the rules are. No dancing on the scaffold, etc. If you do have an accident investigation report, of course, then following the RIDDOR rules, you go onto the Health and Safety website and report it if it is a 7-day or greater injury. Toolbox Talk register, Toolbox Talk training record. We don't have Toolbox Talks because essentially every piece of machinery out there has its own Toolbox Talk. If you buy a Black & Decker drill, it has its own manual. That is your Toolbox Talk. So it's up to you to perform those. Okay, excavation pre-release checklist, contractor questionnaire. If you've got subcontractors coming in, this will actually ask them about their health and safety. So if you've got someone coming in to do some electric works, you're going to be asking, has he got his Part P, etc. Is he level 17 qualified? If he's got someone coming in, he's going to be fitting the boiler for you. Has he got his gas safe, etc. Okay, health and safety information for domestic clients. This actually is a document I was telling you before, where it tells you what a domestic client's responsibilities are. Tells you a bit about CDM in 2015. This is a handy document to actually talk to your clients about. Again, if you're in the negotiating stage with a client or your initial introduction, I assume many of you will go out with a presentation pack. Here's a quote, here's the way we work, here's information about other jobs are done, here's nice smiley photographs of other customers. Take some health and safety information with you to say this is the way we work. Show them this document, have a conversation about them. Let them know that you're very serious about what you do and you're very professional. Okay. What it does, it tells them what their responsibilities are, and it also explains that you, as their contractor, will actually take their responsibilities for them, which of course will make them breathe a sigh of relief, because they're going to start panicking halfway through this document, and you're going to say, you don't need to worry about it because I'm going to do it for you. Okay, breach of health and safety procedures. Again, talking about covering yourself. If you have employees who repeatedly breach the health and safety procedures on site, you can actually document it and have a log of it. If they then have an accident and then say, oh, that was your fault, you can actually say, well, you've repeatedly breached that. And you essentially, it's a bit like a log of a sort of disciplinary for employees doing stupid things. On site. This document we actually produced recently to help somebody with a court case. They made use of it and it worked for them. Okay. Now the final part with CDM 2015, which is new, the health and safety file. Again, this is something that was always there, but there's been far more emphasis on it. With a professional client, they always had to maintain a health and safety file, but now you also hand one over to a domestic client as well, and this is something they will keep and hand over to any builder who turns up to do any future work on the property. Okay, so again, this will be the responsibility of the principal contractor if they're finishing the job, or again, if the principal designer is managing the health and safety of the job, it'll be his responsibility or hers to produce this file, which you then give to the client. So if it's a business, that will be the duty holder. This will be nothing new. This is something that's always happened. It's just that we've actually now added this to the latest version of software. So we've got one again that you can write up yourself, and again you can hand it to your domestic clients. Same as before. Fill in the sections, and if it's fairly common information, once you typed it, you can save your paragraph and reuse it. Okay, and there we have it. That's Health and Safety Xpert 2015, and I hope you found that informative.